Hi, everybody. Welcome to our workshop using MSU Commons in courses. My name is Larissa Babak, and I am the user engagement specialist for the Humanities Commons, which is the overarching umbrella of MSU Commons and some of our other networks. In my role as user engagement specialist, work closely with our community team to engage users in workshops like this one today, as well as to provide user support. And I'm also going to now pass it to Kristen to do a quick introduction.
Hey everybody, I am Kristen Lee. I am with Reference and Discovery Services in the MSU main library, and I am here in my role as first level support for MSU Commons. So when you reach out to the MSU help desk for MSU Commons, you're getting me and staff in my office as part of Reference and Discovery Services. And I've been with MSU now almost 22 years, and I have a lot of workshop and teaching experience. Back in the day, I used to do teaching for D2L, among other things. So this is kind of a nice marriage of this piece that our office does for help desk support and still being able to kind of stretch my teaching chops a little bit, helping Larissa with some of these workshops. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Kristen. So jumping right in. So we're going to start out today with just a quick lightning round of questions to see where we're all at this afternoon. And then I will talk a little bit more about MSU Commons, just dive into a little bit of the features of how you can use MSU Commons as part of your teaching. Then Kristen is going to talk a little bit more about support and how what that will look like from your perspective as an educator or as a student. And we'll point to some resources, and then we'll wrap things up at the end with a Q&A. We don't have a lot of people in this meeting today, but feel free if as we're going, you have any questions or things you want to comment on, feel free to drop those in the chat. We will have time to talk at the end to answer them, but as we're going, Kristen will be monitoring and I will be as well to answer anything that you're wondering as we go. So with that, moving right along, so let's start with our questions. So the first thing that I want to ask you all is how are you all doing today? And I'm going to launch this poll to get some feedback to read the room. So sunny and clear skies. Are you feeling partially cloudy? Are you cloudy with the chance of meatballs, which I was feeling this about an hour ago, and then it started raining, and now I'm feeling more gloomy and rainy. Or are you feeling tornado warning? Maybe it's one of those days where you're just feeling all the feels. So I would, as I said, my vote is personally towards gloomy and rainy. It looks like we have a lot of partially cloudy, so that seems pretty appropriate for the mood. I'm sure everybody is also really busy with the beginning of the year hustle of getting everything together. So we're not all feeling sunny and clear skies. So let me stop and I will share these results. You can all take a look at how we're doing here today. So moving forward into our next lightning round question, how often have you used MSU Commons? So we have done now, this is our second kind of MSU Commons workshop. I'm trying to launch this poll. There we go. I always struggle with the scale of like talking and doing something in Zoom at the same time. It's like still an ongoing practice for me, but here we go. Now I can launch the poll. Okay. So how often have you used MSU Commons? So maybe some of you have attended some of our other workshops and you're really familiar with what we offer. Maybe for some of you, you've used it once or twice, you've accessed it, but you don't really know what it is. And then maybe for a few of you, this is a brand new workshop where you're learning all about MSU Commons for the first time. So I'm going to try in my thoughts today, keep them open enough that if you're a new person to the platform, you learn a little bit about what we are and what we do, and then also point you to some other resources. So if you're familiar with it and you just want kind of the next level, you'll know where to go for support. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of newbies to MSU Commons. So as I said, you will definitely, hopefully by the end of this workshop, get a better sense of how things are going and what it looks like. All right, so last but not least, for our final poll of the workshop is, what are the topics that we're going to cover that you are most interested in learning? Oh, and you know what? I have to stop sharing before I can share the next poll. So which of these are you most interested in learning about? So using discussion boards to facilitate a group conversation. Perhaps in your course, you've used discussion boards in the past and you want to know how you can do that on the Commons. Developing a course website. Allowing students to allowing students to create sites and write blog posts, or sharing materials in the core repository. And our core repository is our open access repository where users can add their teaching materials or syllabi or really anything that is in the loose term of scholarly and receive a DOI for it and get the word out about it. So it looks like for our poll, our respondent is right now, we have a 50-50 split between using discussion boards and allowing students to create sites. So we will be definitely talking about both of these a little bit in this workshop. And and we also have course website now is another response here. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these. We'll also talk a little bit about the core repository, but this is good to know that everyone here is interested in the various topics we're going to cover. All right, so now that we've completed our lightning round, what is MSU Commons? Because I know we have a lot of people here that are not super familiar with the platform. So Humanities Commons, which I mentioned is where my official job title is from, is our kind of wider network that includes a number of other member networks. So Humanities Commons, we're a multi-purpose platform where we do all of the things that I just listed in that last poll related to getting the messages across of scholarly communication in all different sorts of networked ways. But we are hosted and sustained by a team at MSU. So all of our employees that work as part of Humanities Commons are within the MSU community. MSU Commons is our first institutional node of the expanding Commons network. So we are the only network at the moment that is located within one university or institution, but we have a number of other member networks that include the Modern Language Association, Haystack, which is a humanities and arts collaborative, AU Presses, Arliss NA, which is an art librarian society, as well as a Society of Architectural Historians. So you can see that our network is pretty wide reaching in that we're reaching across the humanities to really bring people together. And then we also are right now in the process of expanding into STEM, which is a really exciting project that is being run by folks at MSU, both in the sciences and in the humanities, which will be leading to the launch of STEM Plus Ed Commons, which is going to be happening in the next couple of years as part of a grant project. So although a lot of what I'm talking about is very much grounded in the humanities, we are very quickly expanding to reach out into STEM, which is pretty exciting. Now, MSU Commons, if you want to access, you can go to commons.msu.edu and you will be taken directly to MSU Commons. And all of the users that are listed on the screen will have access to MSU Commons. So if you're a current student, a staff member, faculty, or a retired faculty and staff member, you will automatically be able to create an MSU Commons account. You can do so directly through your MSU SSO. So when you go in through the registration process, you'll be directed there. And that will take you to MSU Commons and you can use those features. Now, anybody on the planet can register for Humanities Commons. It is not limited to humanities scholars or even scholars that have to be within an institution or one of the orgs I mentioned. It is open to anybody that wants to access. So that is available to you if you go to hcommons.org. Now, once students graduate from MSU, we can transfer their MSU Commons account and such as websites they've created directly into Humanities Commons account. So if you have a student that they're working on portfolio pieces in your course and they don't want to lose access, we can transfer that over. You have to contact our help desk and we can get that set up. So the same would also, I should mention, go for faculty and staff that leave the university for whatever reason. We can make some accommodations so that they don't lose access to their sites. So the four main functions of Humanities Commons are profiles, sites, groups, and our core repository. So when you log into Humanities Commons, you will start to create what's called a profile, and that is pretty much just a space where you can update it with your publications, academic interests. It's really similar to a social networking profile in that you can build it to look what you want it to look like fairly quickly and easily to show a little bit about who you are. A lot of people use their profile as a quick space where they can kind of show their academic interests without having to build a full portfolio website. So that's a really quick and easy way to just get started. And as you use the Commons more, it will also automatically populate with information about you. Sites are our WordPress-based websites. And so on the Commons, if you go and you click on sites, you can see that our users create portfolio websites, they create blogs, they create project sites, all kinds of things that you can imagine they create a website for it. And so that is hosted directly by our site. There's no fees involved with it. It's built right into the platform. So it's a great space to launch that project or get the word out about something with the WordPress platform. Groups are our collaborative space where small groups of users can have discussion boards on various topics. They can create different sorts of documents. They can share committee documents, and groups can be used in a lot of different ways. Some groups are more small group collaboration spaces that are private and that are kind of housed in a little off in the cyber world, but not in a place where a lot of people can find them, in that they can be used for that private collaboration. And other areas of groups are more open and available to all, that if you want to share work and get it out there, you can check it out. And then last but not least is our core repository, which is our open access repository where you can deposit video files, podcast files, journal articles, anything that you would deposit that's open access can go there. Anything that's there will receive a DOI, and it can then from there you have a record that it was deposited in our repository. That was a very brief overview of all of the features that are available on MSU Commons. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat to our Intro to Humanities Commons workshop we gave a few months ago. This was a wide-ranging workshop that covered everything that I just discussed, but in more detail. So because we're going to focus more on MSU Commons and courses today, I don't want to spend a lot of time going through those basics, but definitely check out that recording and some of our other resources at the end of this workshop to see like some of the other things that you can do with our site. So jumping in to these functions and how can you use MSU Commons in your course? These are a few examples of ways that MSU instructors in the past have used MSU Commons, and also are just kind of ways that you can start thinking about what you can do with the various features I've mentioned. Feel free if you have any other ideas to drop them in the chat and share them with everyone here. But these are just a few ways you can get started with some of what we've been looking at already. So one thing that I always like to talk about as being a big advantage of MSU Commons is that you can really create a connected classroom with our repository and with all of the pieces that are included in that. So our core repository, if you just think about the work that you do as an instructor or as that you might be doing as a student, you can always add stuff that you value, that you find academic and that you think others might want to share out into that core repository, such as course materials or your syllabus or other sorts of things that are worth sharing. You also might encourage students to do the same if they have certain academic work that you think is of value for others to see. Profiles are in a way that then space that work is represented. And so when you add something to the core repository, it will automatically show up on your user profile on the Commons. And then from there, you have more options to customize, to add other projects, to get involved in groups on the Commons that will then show up. So you can really create a very well-rounded version of who you are as a teacher and as a scholar so that others can really get a sense of who you are. Now with a course website, that is one way that sometimes instructors like to post assignments and get students involved in web authoring. And so you could use it as a project site for students to use and to create something. They can also use blog posts to write and gain experience writing online. And the group's functions of docs and discussion board, those things can be more conducive for private collaboration. So what you can see in all of these examples is that it's a way of creating a well-rounded version of who you are and what your digital presence looks like. And so from there, depending on how many or few of these features you use, you can really shape a very diverse digital presence. So now let's jump in a little bit more specifically to the areas of the Commons and some tips that I have for how you can use them to really get students involved in your course. So the first one is that you can always encourage students to enhance their Commons profiles as a way to begin developing that professional digital presence. Some of our users use their Commons profile as that place of a portfolio website that then they share with their employers, or they direct people to check out to learn more about who they are. And so by doing that with your Commons profile, you're really able to create a very quick and easy space that anybody can look at and learn about you without it taking a lot of time to set up. Profile updates will not take as long as a full website. So if you don't have time to design something that's really all encompassing, include all your project work, you can just go in, add some bio text to a profile, and then move forward. You can also link directly to course projects on your profile as well. So if there's something that's not on the Commons, maybe you have another website that's hosted somewhere else, or you want to link maybe to your professional portfolio on a department website or something, you can link to it there. And then as you start to work through creating your course, as I've mentioned, adding your work to the core repository is a really awesome idea. If you're having students do this, though, just remind them that the work that goes into core needs to be academic in nature, and also that those things that are added to the repository are permanent. So we do not typically remove things from the repository unless they are a clear violation of copyright, or occasionally we get other user requests that are extenuating. But overall, if a student adds something to the core repository, it is permanently out there. And so make sure that, students know if they're adding something that they may regret later, it's probably not a good time to put that in our core repository. But if it is something like a project that they worked really hard on in your course, or you even have created a syllabus or some sort of academic work that you want out there, all great ways that you can get stuff out there and post it. Now, for sites, which, as I mentioned, are WordPress hosted sites that are on the Commons, WordPress sites can be used for students to create blogs, or you can create a course site and then have students write posts on there. And if you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but I've never used WordPress before, I don't know where to get started. One of the great things about WordPress is there are a ton of tutorials out there for beginners. So I was just talking to our product manager at Humanities Commons earlier, and we were talking about how WP Beginner is a great website for getting started. So if you're thinking, okay, I really want to make a course website, I have no idea how WordPress works. Maybe you've used Wix or Squarespace or something else, and you're like, but WordPress is new. WP Beginner is a great platform to go and to learn where to get started with WordPress. Our WordPress on the Commons is not quite as extensive as other WordPress instances online. We do have some limits on themes and plugins. So if you're looking for a site that has a ton of very specific customization, WordPress might not, I'm sorry, not WordPress, Humanities Commons might not be the perfect place for your site. But if you're looking for something also that is pretty easy to create, getting started on the Commons is simple. And getting students involved in writing web content is great because they'll get experience writing and publishing, getting their writing out there that's not just limited to a course management platform can be really helpful. And if they're doing something where they're creating a website as part of the class, that could go into their portfolio piece that they could link to their profile and share out. So all great options of ways you might think about using a course website. So now how do we look at groups, which is the other area of the Commons that's usually more conducive for small group collaboration? Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is that we have three kinds of groups on the Commons. Public groups that anybody in the Commons platform and beyond can see. Private groups that are limited to just those that are requesting membership to that group. And then hidden groups that have to be only managed by an administrator. So that case, the administrator of that group, which might be you as the instructor, has to send invites out to everybody in that group to join. So groups we recommend private or hidden groups because of the fact that there is definitely a little bit of concern around student information being published widely. So if you're planning to use discussion boards in a group, you want to try to limit that from being something that's open to everyone online. But within groups, you have a lot of different functions that you can do. You have a discussion board, which is available for you to use. You can use docs, which is specific to like a wiki editing feature where anybody in the group can go in and make updates. We've had a couple MSU instructors use docs to actually create a collaborative syllabus. It is essentially like the idea of Google Docs, but not quite as high tech, if I'm honest. But it can be used to have multiple people editing a document at once. So if you want to do a collaborative syllabus that has a discussion board as part of a group, then you can do that. And then you can also create a group website, which is a nice way that you can then take advantage of creating a site where a discussion board and students can go to complete their coursework, but then still have the group itself limited to just that certain number of students. So if you want that site to not be available to everybody on the internet, you can limit that and make that really your course's space. As I mentioned already, just be really mindful of FERPA in terms of how you set that up to keep it pretty private. You don't want to have posting grades or anything on that site because that would be in violation of those guidelines. And then the editable syllabus, as I said, is one great way to possibly use groups if it's something that you're interested in. So last but not least, how can you use our core repository through MSU Commons? I've already mentioned these as part of what I've said already, but using the core repository to add a syllabus or course files, encouraging students to potentially deposit research papers or work that they've done that is really solid research based is an awesome way to get students to use our repository. And that way also it's really easy to be findable by other instructors and scholars. We have quite a network of grad students on the Commons that use it to share their research. And it's a great place for seminar papers that maybe they're not quite ready to be published or shared, but they're at a point where they want to have a space for them. So all exciting options that you could potentially consider. So now I know this was kind of a quick overview of everything there, but I know some of you are probably thinking, what's the difference between MSU Commons and D2L? Perhaps you've used D2L, maybe you already are creating your courses there and you're thinking, okay, some of this sounds really great that you have, but I don't understand the difference. So here's a little bit of a breakdown of the pros and cons of both to hopefully help you situate your own situation and how it might fit within MSU Commons. All of the features I've mentioned with MSU Commons, you can share widely around the web. So although MSU Commons registration is specific to MSU, if you create a website, that is something where you can make it that it can be shared widely. So it's not just limited to students in your course or one group of people. Now on MSU Commons, if you're going to create a website, that initial time to set up and design a course site is going to take more time if you're not super familiar with web design. I can tell you from experience, when I was a grad student, I was very ambitious and thought I was going to create a course site for one of my courses. And after getting into about hour 6 of just trying to get it set up, I realized that was a horrible idea. And it wasn't because I didn't have any like tech skills, because I was very confident with it, but it just took more time to build a template out, to get all of my course resources on, to write everything that I wanted there. And that is the benefit of D2L, is that you have your course shell, you can drop in resources pretty quickly and easily. For some of you, maybe that's not a problem and you feel very comfortable online and you like trying out new technologies. And in that case, I will not stop you. But if you're kind of new to it, you might just want to set kind of a timer of, okay, I'm going to start and see how much can I get done in a couple hours. And if you feel like you've not made the progress you want, you might want to think about using a different platform or going back to that D2L. As I mentioned, you also do need to be mindful of FERPA with MSU Commons. D2L is going to be very locked down in terms of who can access it. It's not as much of an issue, but you just also need to be very mindful to tell students not to share personal information or post grades because of those guidelines. And then last but not least, with MSU Commons, we do have some file storage limits, especially in the core repository. On sites, there are some image size limits. And also copyrighted materials will not be able to be shared in the core repository. There are some limits there, and there would be on D2L as well, but just be mindful of the fact that you cannot just add as potentially much storage for things like journal articles that your students are going to read or whatnot onto the Commons. So it's just important to, if you're going to share out resources, find other ways to potentially do that. Now for D2L, you probably know that it has file submission assessments and gradebook built directly into the platform. We do not have that on MSU Commons. So you're going to be limited to specifically what is going to be available to everybody online. So you could potentially, if you want to use the Commons for your course, find other ways to share grades and have a grade book, but you won't be able to do it directly on the platform. Because D2L is a module-based course builder, there's already a lot of structure built into how your course is going to be designed. So it is a little bit different from the Commons, where you're just building a website and you have a lot of freedom to experiment with that, for better or for worse. And also, you might want to just make sure with your department or college that they don't have a rule on using D2L. I admit I'm not an expert on this, but I know at a previous institution I was at, there were some requirements that said that instructors had to use their specific module-based learning platform for students. I don't believe MSU has those rules in place, but some departments may have some guidelines around that. So you may want to just double check. I'm always the kind of person that says err on the side of caution, just to make sure that you don't create any issues along the way, but just things to keep in mind of how it looks. Now, I'm going to point you to some examples, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these just because I want to be a little bit mindful of time. So mus2263.hcommons.org. Oops, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm actually going to escape and then come back so I can copy this into the chat. So this is one course website that's on Humanities Commons that you might want to take a look at. So this one is organized by readings per each week. So you can see how this instructor, they use the WordPress-based style in order to create separate places to go and view resources. So you can organize things by week. A lot of learning management platforms use modules, so that's one way that you can do it. Another example site to take a look at if you're looking for some ideas is this one, which is the American Literature Anthology Project. And they, similar to the other website that I've sent in, they also use kind of a module, or I'm sorry, they go kind of week by week, but they're focusing more on contents. So this one, you can see how they've organized it, where they have, where they have the readings posted and then links out to those readings. So take a look at those sites. And also, if you're looking for more examples, if you browse around the H Commons network or around MSU Commons, you should be able to see some other sites that are out there as well. So now I am going to pass the mic on to Kristen, who's going to talk a little bit more about how you all can get started.
Thanks, Larissa. So Larissa's going to drive the slides for me, and I'm just going to go through a handful of slides here for you. So we've just hit you with a whole bunch of information, and we know that many of you are very new to the Commons. So this is exactly what you might be thinking. Great, but where do I start with all this? So we're going to start to talk about that a little bit. Now, the website address for our instance of the Commons is commons.msu.edu. And this is a screenshot of what that front page looks like. And we've got a nice arrow pointing to the button that says register. So that's your first step, is to register for MSU Commons. And when you click on that register button, it walks you right through the steps that you need in order to do so, to get your MSU Net ID basically synchronized with the Commons. And then every time you come back, you'll be able to log in using MSU single sign-on. This is something that if you have difficulty with, you can contact the help desk, which I'll talk about, and we're happy to walk you through that process. This is a link, instructortoolkit.commons.msu.edu. Maybe Larissa can pop that in the chat as well if it will let her. It's a large set of resources, essentially, that were created by folks that are part of the Commons team over several months to be resources for people specifically interested in using the Commons for teaching. And this link is in multiple places besides being part of our slideshow, and Larissa was able to put it in the chat. Thank you. It's also part of the help pages for MSU Commons. So there are lots of places that you can find this. And it just has a wide variety of resources that instructors might find useful. We could probably go down the rabbit hole and spend 20 or 30 minutes just talking about this, but we don't want to overwhelm folks, you know, in kind of an introductory space. So I want to make sure that you have the link, that you know it's an excellent resource for somebody who wants to do teaching with the Commons. And that, again, if you have questions, you can always reach out to the help desk. So these are some troubleshooting tips that faculty can share with students. You will hear me continue to talk about the help desk and stress wanting you to be able to reach out to us or have your students reach out to us. But in addition to that, as an instructor, if you're going to adopt a technology that feels new, we want you to feel confident in adopting that technology, and that if your students come to you with questions or concerns, yes, we certainly want you to be able to refer them to us, but we want to arm you with some suggestions that you can have it kind of in your own back pocket so that you can feel like you have something to offer your students besides just a referral. And then you can say, well, here are some things you might try. And if you still have trouble, here's how to contact the help desk. You know, they're great. They'll help you with additional questions, kind of a thing. But sometimes it can be really nice to have a place to start besides just, let me pass you off to someone else. Even if that someone else has the expertise you're looking for, you know, when you're building that rapport and those relationships with students, it can sometimes help to have just some information to share. So these are some of the really basic troubleshooting tips that we offer when people are having technical issues. One is to try an alternate browser. Chrome and Firefox are the two we most recommend because they work across multiple platforms, Mac, PC, etc. If somebody says, can I use Safari or can I use Edge? I'll often say, sure. If it's working for you successfully, you're more than welcome to use that browser. But if you do start running into issues, sometimes one of the first things to do is try an alternate browser and see if that fixes it. All of the major browsers also have the option to go to a private or incognito window. The language kind of depends on what browser you're using. It's usually somewhere up in the upper right-hand corner in a menu. And when you open one of those windows, it's basically a completely fresh browser window with no memory. So if your browser has cached something and whatever it has cached is causing the technical glitch that's happening, by going into a private or incognito window, it's ignoring that. It's not seeing it. It's starting with a fresh slate. So oftentimes that will resolve issues. You can also clear the cache and cookies in the browser and then restart it. The link here on this slide, you can see it's not an MSU site. It's a site from another institution, but we have found it to be very helpful in terms of showing how you clear cache and cookies in different browsers on different operating systems. So we keep it in our resources that we sometimes use or recommend when people want to know how to do that. The main recommendation, the rain is starting to get into my mouth here and I can't talk, is make sure when you are clearing cache and cookies that you're clearing them for all time or you're clearing everything. A lot of times by default, your browser is set to only clear your cache and cookies from the last hour or maybe the last 4 hours or the last day. And chances are whatever has your browser hung up is older than that. And that's the reason why it's causing problems, because it's so old, it's essentially now kind of having a temper tantrum. So you need to clean it all out in order for that to be useful. And then sort of when all else fails, we say reboot the computer. I remember when I started this job, the systems person that helped me get my computer set up here, you know, in my very first office way back in 2001, told me rebooting your computer will fix 85 to 90% of the problems you're having. And I've never forgotten that. And in all of my years of help desk support and troubleshooting and teaching, it's proven true. You know, there are times that there are other things that you can try first, but sometimes, especially if you're not someone who reboots your computer on a regular basis. Now, most of the students are using laptops, so they probably do get rebooted fairly frequently because they have to move from place to place a lot. But if you are someone who hasn't rebooted your computer recently, it's never a bad thing to try to do that. Another thing I'll sometimes say is if you don't remember when you last rebooted your computer, reboot your computer because it's probably ready. And then, of course, contact the MSU Commons Help Desk. And our next slide, I think, will go into a little bit more detail about that. So here we are. Our physical office is located in the MSU main library. We do have folks that work hybrid schedules. So sometimes we're home, sometimes we're here. I'm not in my office, but I am in the building. I'm just in one of our conference rooms. This is our phone number. These are our current hours. I expect these hours to hold for the foreseeable future, but there are places that they are posted if they do change. There is an email address, and then there's also a link to basically a question form that goes to us. And then also on this page, a link to the support for H Commons, which also relates to MSU. And then the email address down here for hello@H Commons, you probably won't need that as often as folks who are not part of the MSU node, because you would want to start with us. You would want to start with either that phone number that's there at the top, or that commons@msu.libanswers.com, or the link to the fill out the question form there. Because you go through us first, and then if we, for some reason, whatever the issue is, can't resolve it for you, or it's something that requires someone who can get a little deeper under the hood than we can, we go ahead and escalate that to the larger Humanities/MSU Commons team that includes Larissa. So she's one of the people that I will reach out to for user support if I get something on my plate that needs back-end tweaking. Like she was talking about, if you have an MSU student who's going to graduate and they have a bunch of stuff on MSU Commons and they want to put it on Humanities Commons so they can keep it, that's something that has to be done at Larissa's level. But if the student reaches out to us and says, hey, I want to move all this stuff from MSU Commons to Humanities Commons, great. Let us file the necessary ticket for you with the people who will do that. And then we'll let you know, when that's done. And then if that were me working on it, then I'd reach out to Larissa and say, hey, this person needs their content moved from MSU Commons to Humanities Commons, and that gets done. We always want MSU folks to have a front line of support from other MSU folks and from people that are, here on campus, that where you have kind of those relationships. And like I said, many folks in our office provided D2L support in a past life. So we're very much used to assisting faculty and troubleshooting issues and, and having a workflow that gets things done. If you send something to us, it's something will happen to it. It's not going to get lost in the ether. We're going to make sure that things get taken care of. So I do want to very much, encourage folks to reach out to us if you do run into problems or you do have questions, because we want to provide whatever support we can. The information here for Humanities Commons is helpful because you may have and interact with colleagues, maybe from other institutions who are on the Commons, or you may have certain aspects of your Commons existence where you do want it to be more broad, where you want to be able to share it outside of the MSU community. So having the resources here for contacting Humanities Commons through their email address, through their Twitter, and through their Mastodon. These are all active ways that the folks on the Commons team are interacting with folks on a regular basis.
Thanks, Kristen.
Sure.
So, yeah, I cannot say enough also good things about the help desk. Really, they are a great group of people and are definitely, we've been really grateful to their support with MSU Commons from the Humanities Commons perspective. So definitely, if you have any questions, direct them to them, and then, as Kristen said, they will escalate if there is something that is happening that is beyond anyone's control. So moving forward, though, beyond just even following us on Twitter or Mastodon, we also just last week launched our monthly newsletter, which is going to be an ongoing newsletter for anybody within the Humanities Commons community, including MSU Commons. I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat now, but this is the place to sign up if you want to know more about what's going on. We have a lot of stuff happening, ranging from workshops like this one to a recent redesign of our repository, which is going to be launching in February of 2024. So we're moving into a brand new system called Invenio that's going to allow for a ton of new customization options, the ability to create versions of core deposits, and really just all around a lot of exciting stuff. And so this is the first place to go if you want to find out a little bit about what we're up to, and also to access recordings from previous workshops and just to keep up to date on what our team is doing. So definitely encourage you all to check that up and sign up there. Now, with that, that's going to end our kind of formal presentation part of today. So, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature, or if you'd prefer to just type out questions in the chat, that's also fine. We will both be here and we'll manage it, for a few minutes, before we depart.